So this is our clay from last week. Look at your design and just take one of the tools and draw out. I think I'll use this as my front bit. So we're going to have eye shapes there. It's a little bit higher up. And this looks like this mouth shape. Looks like it's going to be cut into the clay. It's going to be roughly like that, and then he's got a few details for ears and then this sort of tail and design shape on the back. What we're going to do today is we're going to just start on a couple of the features. If we take our ideas of the eyes, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have the eyes going in, and then I'm going to put some extra bits of clay to create those features. So there's two ways if you want to make the eyes to go in. One, you can just push in slightly, dent them. In other words, I'm compacting the clay a little bit. I can use my finger. Alternatively, if I want to go in a bit deeper, but we don't want to go right the way through, I can carve away a little bit of the clay. Now you can see all the time I'm doing this, I'm holding it in my hand. I can put it on the table and just carefully hold it. So not gone too deep. Best tools in a way for smoothing clay is actually your finger. Trying to make them look symmetrical. Now in this lesson, if you just get both eyes done, doing quite well. So I'm pretty happy with that. Can neaten it up later on. So how am I going to do my eyes? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make two eyes which come out, and I'm going to then carve some designs on them. So I'm going to use some of my spare clay. I'm going to mold that into a little bit like an oval shape. Now, I think that's too big. So, there's one to go on there. So this is a dry fit, it's not stuck on yet. Let's do the other one. So again, bit of wet clay. Now this is where you need to be careful, because if, for example, you put that on there and you left a little bit of a gap underneath, an air pocket, what would happen is the clay, when it went into the kiln goes up to about 1000 degrees centigrade, so the air would expand as it heats up, and then At worst, that would then crack and fall off, or it could split the whole clay sculpture. So I'm just going to push that down so it joins, and then again. So that gives us our basic shape. Just going to do 2 extra things for this lesson. I'm going to put 2 of these eyebrow type shapes. Now, trying to put cross hatching on these will be quite difficult. So what I'm going to just do is I'm just going to try to embed them into some wet clay. And again, this one, try to embed them on some wet clay. And then obviously you can then adjust them. So for example, this one looks shorter than that one. So I'm just going to take my knife, take that little excess off to make it about the same. In terms of the modeling, one thing to do is when you are done, then it comes down to the fine modeling. So for example, I'm going to just take some of that excess. It's difficult to get it perfect first time because when the clay dries out a little bit, then it becomes slightly easier to model. I'm going to just do this one eye. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I'm using this tool at the moment. A bit deeper in there, makes them stand out a little bit more. And I could leave that now and then go on to the nose. And then when it's a bit drier next week, I can then add some more detail. So for example, if we go back to our design, it may be the case, for example, this little central area, I'm going to just push in. Create that little shape. Maybe the case, I'm going to take a tiny bit of clay and pop it in there. Obviously, could be an air pocket behind there, so I need to be quite careful. Then there's not much detail in the eyebrows there, but of course, might think, okay, I'm going to improve the design. I'm going to cut some hair-like effects. I'm quite happy with that for a starting point, and then it would be the case of doing the other eye. There's both eyes done. It's still quite wet, the clay, so it'll be easier when the clay's a bit drier to smooth it out. We'll talk about that later. So next we're going to take a flat bit of clay, then decide what we're going to do for our nose shape. It's like a triangular shape upside down. I'm going to cut it roughly to size. So part of it is trying to decide how much modeling do you do when it's stuck on, or how much do you do beforehand. So I'm just going to round off the edges a little bit, smooth the surface a little bit. So next, bit of cross hatching. Bit of cross hatching. I'm going to push that on pretty firmly, but not enough to really dent it. And this is, of course, where sometimes the drawing is a little bit unclear. So I'm just going to try to make it up on what looks best. I'm going to have those looking like they're going into the corner of the eye. I think what I'll do is I'm going to try to cut out this top bit a little bit. It looks like a bit like a Y shape. Still not perfectly smooth, but over time you'll be able to do that, particularly when the clay dries out a little bit more. Now, when it comes to doing the more delicate details, so for example here, the ears, or if you've got wings, I'd put them on last, in the last week, for example. So I'm not going to do those last. If I'm going to cut out this mouth area, obviously I need to wait till this is dried up a bit so I can pull out my toilet roll from the bottom. So that's probably about 3 lessons work. And again, when we're finished, we've got our bag. Got a bit of water, and then the bag will cling to there. When it starts to firm out, maybe in lesson 3, you can take one of the newspapers, and if you remember, I did the last couple of newspapers in half sheets. So I took one of the newspapers out, and then I can tuck that into the top like that.